Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, you guys, my review for Superman and Lois Season 2. Before we get into it, I do want to warn you guys, this video will be containing massive spoilers for every single episode. This is going to be more of a discussion type of video. There'll be timestamps linked in the description down below if you want to skip around to certain things I'm going to be talking about. And before we get into it, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe button to notifications on so you don't miss any time I open a video or I go live. Both wasting more time, let's get into it. So I want to start off this video by just talking about the overall season, and I think that it's a good season. Honestly, it might be a great season. I do think season 1 is better than this season, but I don't think it's better by that much. My only thing is with this season and why I can commend it so much is because of how jam-packed it really is. There's so many different stories happening. I'm going to talk in depth on a lot of different storylines later in this video, but it's definitely very out of this world compared to last season. And I'm going to be honest, in terms of being smart with their budget and what story they could tell, they've definitely stretched it out here, especially compared to the first season. That's what I like so much about the first season. That's why I got really intrigued to the show, because they could have gone all out after the first season and they didn't do that there, and I think it was a good choice. I thought they made a great move by making it a little bit more grounded in terms of the amount of times that they're going into space, the amount of times they're going into the fortress and stuff like that. And as someone who's not a massive Superman like comic reader or anything like that, I do know that there's stories to tell that are just on Earth, but in terms of setting up an overall story for what can happen in this Superman's world, and we'll talk about the Arrowverse stuff later, as we did get some crazy confirmations in the finale. There's a lot to talk about there, but again, there's not too many stories that are kind of limiting this show. I definitely felt like they could have kept it a little bit more on Earth, but in terms of like what they were doing in the first half of the season, I really liked it story-wise, especially when it comes to Bizarro and Ali Alston. I thought they did a good job of utilizing their budget in the first half of the season. Like, I don't know how the show's budget works and stuff like that, but I do know that a lot of CW shows go out of their way. They try to make stories that are super crazy, but their budget doesn't allow them to make it look good. I will say this season, visually, CGI wise, of course it looks a little bit worse than last year's season, but that doesn't mean it's a worse season or worse visually overall, because they were just going for something a little bit more out of their rank, in my opinion, at least budget wise. And that's why I do think this show does need to move to HBO Max, but I'll talk about that later in this video. Again, Bizarro, Superman, Ali Alston, I thought they were great utilizations in this season specifically. I definitely thought that Bizarro Superman was going to end up being the main villain, the main dude that he fights, but there's twists, there's turns as always in Superman and Lois, and I'll talk about the villainous side specifically more in depth of the story later in this video. But I will say one thing that I really liked of the season as a whole was how they did the difference between the main world and then the inverse world. My only issue with the thing is story wise, and how the transition in the middle of the season really wasn't that good. And my point behind that is that I felt like there was a lot of other stories riding on just the regular world and the regular Earth that didn't necessarily have to do with Bizarre Superman or Ali Alston or anything like that. And that was more of our grounded storyline with Sarah, John, Jordan, even Lois. I definitely felt like the second half of the season really took a lot of those more grounded aspects away. And I'm glad that we had both in this season. I'm actually very grateful for that, because they definitely could have gone all in on one or the other. I definitely felt like the first half of this season was more like season 1, and I enjoyed that. And I also liked that the second half of this season felt like something brand new, something super fresh, and I also like that a lot. But that also makes it to where the transition in the middle of this season led to a good chunk of episodes, I would say like 3 to 5 episodes, that really weren't as good as the other episodes. They didn't really live up to that tier because they weren't telling their own stories. They were trying to handle the fact that, okay, we have like 6 different storylines and we need to transfer them all to make sense with this one that we're going to lead off in the last few episodes with. And hell, I love the last few episodes storylines. The last 2 episodes are the best episodes of the season, in my opinion, or some of the best episodes. And episode 14, the one before the finale, is easily the best episode of this season, and maybe even the best of the entire show. So I'm very happy with where the storylines led, but that, again, the 2 very different polar sides of this show definitely clash in the middle of this season, and I think that led to a few worse episodes than what we had last season, which is why I still think season 1 is just a little bit better. But we have to talk about how this show is not in the Arrowverse. So Lois's dad basically says, other worlds have leagues of heroes and we don't, but we have Superman. So I'm guessing that this is some variant of Superman, or like whatever they call it in the Arrowverse, because I'm not too familiar with that. I haven't seen Supergirl. I've seen a little bit of Arrow, and I saw like the first half of all the Flash seasons, but it looks like this is just a different variant of Superman. And we did get information from the writers that this Superman does take place in a different world. And this is so cool to me because I have a little theory that I'll talk about in just a second, but I do want to say that I understand why people are mad at this. I understand why people are like, oh, this retcons so much stuff, blah, blah, blah. Personally, I don't care, okay? It doesn't matter to me because I'm not like a diehard Arrowverse CW fan. Like, I enjoy the first few seasons of The Flash. I enjoy a few episodes of Arrow from what I've seen. And I want to watch the first two seasons of Arrow because I've heard they're really, really good. Some of the best superhero television ever. But it does not matter to me because this show being on its own allows for way better storytelling that doesn't depend on what the Arrowverse has done before. And also, this makes sense because The Flash is ending next season, and that means there's like no other like superheroes left or like super shows left other than what I think like Supergirl, I think is her name, the one with like the American flag on her costume and the yellow staff. Like, I don't know what else is going on in the Arrowverse, so I'm kind of glad that they're letting this Superman go. Like, just let him go. And the main reason I'm so excited about this, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier before, is HBO Max. This is going to be huge for the show in my opinion. So I want to start off by talking about my biggest issue with this season as a whole and how HBO Max could solve it, and that is the hiatuses. Now, CW gave this show a lot of hiatuses, and it's either, number one, there were a lot of events going on that the CW had to air other stuff for, so they couldn't have Superman and Lois, and they had hiatuses for all the shows in those times. But there's also other moments where it does feel like they're just not done with the season. There was this interview that the writers did, and they said, oh, we were in the post-production room literally like a night before the episode premiered. And that is so tough. No team should have to go through that, in my opinion. So what I'm saying is put it on HBO Max. They'll get a bigger budget. They'll let them like kind of take over this show, and they'll make it a little bit more grander. And I do want to talk about the budget, but just in general, like the hiatuses, it's too much. It breaks up all the tension, and it really, in my opinion, it ruins the storytelling of this show because it breaks so much tension. And it's not necessarily the smaller stories that are getting interrupted, but it's the bigger picture. Like, there's a lot of stuff from episodes 1 through 3 that link and have parallels to the last 3 episodes, but it's been months and months and months and months and months since we've seen those first 3 episodes. And I'm not one to go rewatch episodes of shows, especially while the same season is airing, because I shouldn't have to. It should be premiering every single week. And this is what, only like 15 episodes in a season, so it's not even like it's taking that long. Like, you can have a mid-season break. That always makes sense. That builds tension, of anything, for the very back half of the season, and I enjoy that. But they had like 4 hiatuses this season, and it was honestly unbelievable. In terms of HBO Max, they could definitely fix that, but they also will give it a bigger budget. This show doesn't necessarily need a bigger budget, but I think this season is a telltale sign that they want to tell bigger stories, and in order to do that properly is to give it a bigger budget. Also, better writing, I think. I mean, the writing is also great in my opinion, but I do think that they could take it to the next level because HBO Max has shows like Succession, Barry, and then there's also other shows on like Amazon Prime, like The Boys. And I think the biggest thing that those shows do really well is balancing a bunch of the side characters and making all the impact on one main character. So The Boys does it with like Homelander and Billy Butcher. Barry does it with Barry himself. Succession does it with Kendall. And honestly, in general, there's just a bunch of different characters going around, and there's a lot of different storylines. Now, I'm not saying Superman and Lois is going to get on that tier of writing, but having writers from those same types of companies, I think that'll really, really just allow for better cohesiveness with all the stories. Because like I said before, there's a weird transition period in this season, and I definitely felt like one big thing they could have fixed was how they transitioned all these things, and I think that HBO Max's writing would help a lot. But I do now want to talk about Superman himself. I think this is the perfect Superman story. Tyler Hoechlin, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's my favorite Superman ever. He's the best rendition of Superman. The finale proves it. Honestly, every single episode proves it. But I do think they wouldn't really be complete without our Lois, which is is another super important factor in this show. And I'll talk about her when I talk about other side characters, but Superman himself, he's just awesome in this show. I know I was talking super fast just now, but like I'm trying to like think about Superman because he is so good. The scene where he gets his powers back in the sun is absolutely stunning. And going into the sun, not knowing if you're gonna get your powers back or not, but doing it to save humanity is like the most Superman thing I've ever seen. And I will say he was definitely sidelined in the middle of the season, and that was because I felt like they had to wrap up the storylines on like the main Earth, all of the kids' storylines, all that kind of stuff, especially stuff with Lois, the DOD, Ali Alston, introducing all those bigger aspects, right? And Superman was in the inverse world. That's fine with me. There it makes sense because then it's also like proving to the audience that they don't need Superman in the show. He is the catalyst. He is the main center of everything. He's the one that saves the day. But at the same time, all these stories are so interesting that Superman is just an add-on. And I completely agree. And I enjoy the way that they implemented Superman this season because, especially compared to the first season, it definitely felt like here he was the key player. He felt like he was that character that's like, when he is gone, the show doesn't feel bad, but you can definitely tell it's a decrease in morality. Of course, Lois is scared where her husband is. The kids are scared where their dad is. And there was that one storyline with Jonathan, and him and his dad didn't necessarily come to an agreement on anything with the XK or stuff like that. And so I thought it was very interesting how they planned that timing and how all of these different aspects came into play. When Superman isn't there, he's still the catalyst for a bunch of action. And I really just love the storytelling here. I also do think that the Bizarro twist, it wasn't the best thing in this season. I definitely think that it was kind of unneeded. It felt like it was the thing that was rushed in this episode. And going back to the HBO Max thing really quick, this season could have been split into 2 seasons. Even if they don't do it on HBO, even if they do it on HBO Max, I don't see them doing 8 episode seasons, but it would have been perfect. We had 15 episodes here, right? You do 8 40-minute episodes on HBO Max, give us 2 seasons. You do the Bizarro thing or the Bizarro Superman in the first season of the 2, and by the end of that first one, episode 8, you have a huge twist where it's Ali Alston. You see the twist and stuff like that. And then the second season, that's where you have the actual Ali Alston stuff, and you can take your time, close off the stories. You get longer episodes in HBO Max, as well as a bigger budget, better writing team. It shouldn't be that difficult of a decision, in my opinion, especially if you want the best show possible. HBO Max needs to take it over. I still think the CW's version of it is great. I mean, they've crafted my favorite Superman ever, so of course their writing is not bad, but I definitely think it can be elevated to another level if they put it onto HBO Max to have all those other perks. But talking about villains in general, I definitely do think Ali Alston, she was not a bad villain, but the thing is there wasn't much focus on her in general. But I don't like how she impacted the story in terms of Lois. Lois was my favorite character in season 1, talking about the miscarriage and all of her wrongdoings and how it was very sad. Her arc last season was sad, but it was also motivating and learning to accept and move on. And it was one of the most emotional arcs in all of television, in my personal opinion, at least superhero media. But personally, I really just don't like how they utilized Lois's sister Lucy. She felt like just a parasite to the story, and I would rather watch stuff with the Cushing family than actually Lucy. And personally, I've seen a lot of hate for the Cushing family. I'll talk about them in a second, but I personally like them a lot. I think they're very interesting. Lucy feels like more of a parasite to our story than the actual Cushing family, but I definitely feel like Lucy, she's an interesting character and she works in Lois's arc. But even in the finale, we didn't really get much of her. Like it didn't feel like an actual resolution. Her and her dad, our General Lane, are gonna be going off somewhere. They're like, she's fine now, but it didn't even feel like a resolution that was like well worth my time. And that's like the weakest point of the season, in my opinion. I was so tempted to just skip 10 seconds every single time she was on screen because she's just so annoying. She keeps going back, and I just wanted her out of the story. I understand her emotional connection to Lois. I understand her emotional connection to General Lane, but it just wasn't that cool, especially compared to other like smaller side characters I wanted more of, like Anderson. Anderson was super prominent in the first half of the season, but Ali obviously killed him off. He was so cool. I literally hated his guts, but that was the point of him. And so I really like what they did with him, and I much rather would have seen more of Anderson than we did Lucy. But I will say the final 2 episodes definitely did the villain stuff the best. We had the inverse versions of Jonathan and Lana fighting Jordan, and that was like my favorite fight in the entire show. And now I want to talk about action, obviously. This action was absolute peak. Jordan's fight with the Bizarro Jonathan and the Lana were absolutely awesome. Probably the best action scene in the entire show. And I just love how they utilize the storytelling with the Bizarro characters in the action. How they have, obviously, the ice laser lasers and stuff like that. It's just so cool. And also, I like the little touch that the Bizarro Jonathan was the one that had the powers and not the Bizarro Jordan. That was a cool flip-flop that they made in both different worlds. So I thought that was really, really cool. And the biggest thing I can say is that they knew where to put their budget with these fights. They literally destroyed a small little section of a building in that Lana fight against Jordan. That gym fight is some of the best CG and fighting and action that we've seen in the entire show, including season 1, which is why I love it so much. And again, they just know what they're doing. Jordan and Jonathan's storylines in this season were pretty well balanced as well. I thought that they did a great job of balancing both of the characters. They gave us a lot more of Jonathan in the first half of the season. He was a lot more prominent there with the XK and the drugs and stuff like that. And I thought the first half of the season, like I said before, in terms of just like splitting the seasons up, I definitely felt like the first half gave us more of the human side to Clark Kent and his relationship with Jonathan, as well as balancing the spacey stuff. But I definitely felt like towards the second half of the season, we kind of got into the more Superman arc, and Jonathan's stuff obviously started to tone down. I don't know what they're going to do with XK in the future of this show, because obviously we do know that John Henry also did use the XK on his suit, and that's how they saved the day. I'll be talking about them more a little bit later, but I do hope that Jonathan gets a little bit more time next season that's not just like high school drama related, because I feel like he's a very interesting character, but at the same time it feels like him along with the Cushing family feel the most CWE to me. They feel the most weirdly written and awkwardly written characters to kind of just fit into the story. And obviously Jonathan, in my opinion, first season, I thought they did a great job of meshing his character into the story, especially compared to the fact that like he wasn't the one struggling with powers like Jordan was in the first season. So I thought that was really cool. But speaking of Jordan, Superboy, he's not actually Superboy, but he's dope. I mean, I love his powers. The episode 14 power scene in that fight scene is literally peak action of the show. And again, I just love the balance between both of them. Jordan is obviously way more prominent in the second half of the season. He literally saves Tal Rowe, which is so sick, and that little back and forth, and how they get trucks in the finale, that was hilarious. I just love every aspect of Jordan and Jonathan. Again, the biggest thing is keeping balance between these two characters. And last season, that was a big issue that I had, was I feel like they put a lot more weight on Jordan, and Jordan just felt like a crybaby. But in this season, they definitely put more work into both of these characters, and it allowed me to care for both of them and not view one as just a crybaby, because they balanced them well. We got enough of each one, and what we got of each character was really, really good. Now, in terms of other characters like Lois, the Cushing family, John Henry and his daughter, stuff like that, Lois, she's great in this season. Just felt very sidelined with the Lucy stuff. Again, I liked her a lot more in season 1. And in terms of how they've changed from season 1 to season 2, I definitely do feel like Lois was the biggest downgrade, especially just when it comes to the emotional side of things. She's as motivational, she's as fun, she's as cool of a character. It just felt like that main story that they were going for definitely went downhill. And it wasn't even all of the season. It felt like the first two episodes, they did a great job with their character, but the rest of the season, it definitely felt like she went a little bit downhill, especially with the Lucy stuff. It felt like her efforts were put into the wrong place, if you know what I'm saying. But next up, the Cushing family, of course. Personally, I like their story. They definitely bring the cheesy CW aspects of the show. A lot of people agree with me there. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say that, oh, they just don't like the Cushing family, they need less screen time, stuff like that. I actually think that they're pretty cool. I thought Sarah and Jordan's development through the season was really, really cool. And I love Lana's mayoral run thing. That's cool, as well as the husband. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but I really do like what they're doing with him in his storyline of trying to get Lana back and stuff like that. Overall, the Cushing family, they're nothing spectacular. You know, they definitely bring the drama side into this show, and I would much rather the Kent family drama, like the XK and all that kind of stuff. I would much rather that. But for side characters that also kind of implement themselves into the lives of the Kents, I think they do a good job. And then, of course, we have John Henry and his daughter. I love the way that they're utilized. From the ending of the last season to now, I definitely do feel like they've become a great and very prominent part of the show, which I'm very, very happy about. And they've been a super crucial part of the show. But at the same time, it's like they know when to step away. They don't interfere when we need personal time with the Kents. It doesn't feel like they're always barging in. And I thought that having them move into a separate place in the beginning of the season was a great story point. And it, number one, allowed the Kents to be separated, but also allowed them to come together whenever they needed. And so they also saved the day. Like literally John Henry saved the day, you know, as well as his daughter putting the XK onto the ship and then throwing into the Ali Alston thing. Like that was sick as well. Like in my opinion, they are like the perfect side aspect of this show. Like again, they know when to be there, they know when not to be there. And quickly before I give you guys my final thoughts, I just wanted to talk about some stuff about season 3, kind of what I'm expecting. And overall, I'm very scared, but I'm also very excited just because the thought of this many people knowing Superman's secret identity scares me a lot in terms of the tension of it. There's always so much tension and kind of where's Clark? What is he gonna do? Like Lois, how is she gonna make up a lie for this? The kids, how are they gonna keep lying to all the other families and stuff like that? But throughout this season, just more and more and more people have found out about this. First it was Lana, then it was Sarah, and now it's Chrissy from the Daily Gazette thingy. And like that's cool, like it's nice that they know about it, and it brings a nice bond between our main set of characters, but it definitely just feels weird. I mean, it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. It's just kind of something that scares me in terms of like story-wise. Like that's such a big part. It brings so much tension. Like there's already great tension from the story itself. There's already so much like hell on earth type stuff going on, and that secret identity stuff just brings in a whole other thing of tension into our main story. And I think they did a great job with that through the first 2 seasons, but now that they know his secret identity, stuff like that, I don't know where they're going with that. In terms of other just small story stuff, I think Tal-Rho's story has been really good. Like John Henry, he knows when to get in the story and when to get out of the story. So I like that from him, but I don't know where he's going story-wise because he goes to the Bizarro Smallville. But I don't know where his story is really going from here. I'm excited to see what they do with Tal-Rho, but he did go to the inverse Smallville, which is a little cool thing, which I'm excited to see where they go with him. And then finally, villains for next season. So there was a quote from one of the writers, and I'm going to read it out and put it on screen for you guys. So he says, well, we've seen Kilgrave, Brendan Fletcher in season 1, right? And we've mentioned Intergang. My hiatus starts tomorrow, so we haven't in earnest gotten to any huge discussions, but there's always ideas that float around, sort of pre-collate. But generally, we want to do what we did with the Eradicator, with Parasite Twins, and find our way into it. That's different and new. Sort of highlight other aspects and have them come out in interesting ways so it feels like a new version. So obviously at the end of the finale, Diggle did mention the Intergang and stuff like that. So of course, it does seem like what the writer said is like they're going to try to introduce smaller parts of the Intergang and kind of slowly bring them onto the season. And I'm very excited for that. I'm actually very excited for like new sets of superpowers and stuff like that to be in the show. Because that's one thing I really love about The Flash. It's like every season there was a new like big villain, and it was always like just the particles and stuff like that created really interesting people with very interesting powers. And I thought that was really, really cool. But I did see this one thing online about this villain named Bruno Mannheim, and I think that they're going to be utilizing him next season, and he seems like a very interesting person as he is part of the Intergang. So villains wise, they can do a lot next season, and I'm glad that they set up the Intergang just because it does feel like they have a lot more options to explore there in terms of what villains they want and what stories they can tell. And I think that'll also let us implement Jordan into the storyline more, because there'll be so many villains that maybe he'll start to get to take on a lot more of them, and maybe he'll get his own suit as well, which is super exciting. But my final thoughts on Superman and Lois season 2, I really like this show, man. My only problems come in the middle of the show when they're trying to transition between story points, but I really love what they're doing here. This isn't just a CW show. In my opinion, this shouldn't even be classified in the same name as what The Flash has become right now and all these other superhero shows on the CW. But again, Superman and Lois, this show continues to surprise me every single week. I'm very excited to see the future of the show, and somehow the CW managed to craft the best version of Superman in my eyes. But guys, those are all my thoughts on Superman and Lois season 2. Let me know you guys thought of this entire season in the comments down below. Also, I'll be covering all things Superman and Lois season 3 when all of that stuff starts to roll out, so make sure to subscribe and notifications on so you don't miss when I upload a video or I go live. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.